Welcome back everyone. Let's go ahead and do, I guess, another video. The Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge was a phone that came out many years ago, and I don't really think anybody's planning on buying it anymore, but it's kind of like a tradition that I have to talk about all these Samsung phones, and this one happened to be the next one. So I feel like this phone really revolutionized the rest of Samsung Galaxy S series of devices after this, because even after all these devices, especially after the S7 Edge, we pretty much got curved displays on almost every single Samsung Galaxy S and a lot of Note phones that came out, but now that kind of seems to be more of like an ultra feature, or basically an ultra feature because the Note 20 doesn't have it. The Galaxy S21 is said to have more of a flat display, so it's kind of become more of a premium feature. Even for some people, it's like something they don't even want, which is pretty strange because I kind of like it, but it doesn't mean everyone else does. Now with the Galaxy S6 Edge, this was, I think, the second device to have a curved display from Samsung, the first one being the Note Edge, which I've also reviewed, I think, like 2 years ago. And with the Galaxy S6 Edge, this thing, obviously nobody should be picking it up. It has depreciated quite a bit, so some people may think it's still a good phone, but I think a Galaxy S8 is miles ahead of this phone, and I would way rather recommend that. So whatever phones else I would recommend throughout this year, I'll leave them linked down below. You guys can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now starting off with the front, this is the best and most iconic thing of the Galaxy S6 Edge. It has a 5.1-inch Super AMOLED display, 1440p, an amazing display still. My specific units pretty much have all burn-in on it, but I remember looking at this phone without burn-in on it, and I can definitely tell you Samsung has made really, really good panels throughout the year, but specifically with the Galaxy S6 series, they knocked it out of the park. I think these ones were really the switch from, kind of like a flagship price device that's, still kind of feeling cheap in the hand to a more luxurious brand. This was the phone that pretty much switched to the S6 Edge and the Galaxy S6. Now, it did come with the cost of a lot of other things, but regardless, the panel of this phone felt great. If the phone felt really, really premium still, even to this day, the curved edge screen was something that we didn't see a lot of. Now we have phones that with like foldable displays and all this other crazy stuff, but at this time, having this type of curve was actually pretty legendary in my opinion. Now you do have the home button on the front still, fingerprint sensor in that display with the capacitive keys next to it, so for sure when it came down to it, the front panel in my opinion, and the whole entire phone itself still feels really premium. On the bottom, headphone jack with a micro USB port, and on the back, you have the glass back on this phone, which surprisingly, a 2015 phone with it still feeling this great is super crazy to me. To give you some perspective, no iPhones at this time had glass backs. The iPhone 6S came out the same year, the iPhone 6S Plus obviously. Some LG phones came out, but this is one of those, premium phones that had glass on the back, and in and of itself, it made this phone feel that much more premium. We had wireless charging on this device. However, we got a smaller battery first of all, but we didn't get a removable back, and we didn't even get a micro SD card slot on this phone. So that's why it's kind of funny, because this phone in some ways is kind of like a kick up to what the Samsung Galaxy S21 eventually did with its next model. So I think at the end of the day, this is more of a reason why the Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge may be better feeling than the Galaxy S21. But as stated before, at the end of the day, you're going to be getting a much better feeling phone from a Galaxy S21, a much more better phone, a much better performing phone, all this crazy stuff from the S21, more so than the S6 Edge at the end of the day. So in terms of that pretty much covers it up. Now, camera-wise, since we're already on the back, we'll go ahead and hit on it. It does have a single 16 megapixel sensor, and I think at the end of the day, even still, it's a pretty good sensor for the most part. Now, there have been a lot of S6 Edges and even S6s that I've messed with that have dust in the camera lens and all that stuff, so that stuff naturally happens throughout the years. Because these phones, this one's being a 6-year-old device, it's definitely not going to feel like the most premium feeling thing, and because of that, chipping starts to happen, dust and debris gets all over the phone, and it just happens because of test of time. The Galaxy S21 is also going to experience that, 10 years from now too. So with that being out of the way, the raw camera lens with no obstructions, no nothing, is actually a pretty good camera lens for the most part. You can do 4K at 30, which I think is really good, and still pretty current. It would have been better if it was a little bit more, like 4K at 60, but we did eventually get that with the Galaxy S9, I think. So at the end of the day, this camera lens is actually still a pretty good camera. Now, the front camera is a little bit different, which we'll get into in a second, but I think the thing that ages this camera the most, especially right now, is probably the lack of multiple lenses. We don't have a telephoto ultra wide, nothing like that. So that really does kind of hinder this type of camera and stopping it from being a super legendary device. But I think at the end of the day, the quality is still pretty good. The video quality is surprisingly pretty good as well. I think the features built into this camera are also really, really good. Like, it's actually a really good camera for it being 6 years old. Obviously, if a manufacturer dropped this camera as a brand new phone right now in 2021, it would be a horrible idea. I would not recommend anyone buying it. But because of the price and because of the year it came out and all that stuff, it's actually pretty surprising, performing camera for sure. On the front though, we have a single 5 megapixel camera, and this is probably one of its biggest downsides. I think this camera had a really bad front camera, 1440p. The resolution was actually pretty surprisingly high for that time, but it's really not that good of a camera. You're gonna have a lot of, problems with it, and I probably would not recommend people picking it up just because of the front camera, but the back camera is still surprisingly good for a 6-year-old phone, so at the end of the day, that pretty much covers it up in the camera standpoint. Now moving on to probably the worst thing, as I stated before, of the Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge in 2021, and that's the battery life and the software. So first of all, I don't know which one you want me to start off with, but I'll start off with the software because they kind of go hand in hand. This thing started off with Android 5.0.2. It eventually did get Android 7.0, which I think is cool, okay, whatever. But not only did it stop literally 2 years of software support, and that was it, but it also was on a really weird version of software. I think, Samsung Experience, TouchWiz, whatever you want to call it, it just wasn't that great of a software. I think Samsung eventually noticed that, and they eventually switched over to One UI. It still has a lot of work, but I don't know, this software was a mess. It was not optimized for the hardware at all, and even now it's just so glitchy. It has a lot of problems, and I even remember picking up the Galaxy S7 the first day it came out or whatever, many years ago, and I had a weird experience with that one too, and I think that was on Android Marshmallow or Android Nougat or whatever, and I had a really weird experience with that phone in terms of the software, and this is no different. The fact that it ended on Android 7.0 is pretty crazy to me. So I think the software, I wish it got a couple more versions of software, but I do think you are able to custom ROM it. I did successfully custom ROM my Samsung Galaxy S6, and that was actually a really, really hard process, but it was actually much worth it. I mean, it transformed it into a brand new phone. I was able to get Android 10 on it, and that was for sure some really, really impressive stuff. And I was able to do a ton of different things with that specific device. Now, on the other hand, with the Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge, whether you're able to custom ROM it or not, it doesn't really matter. You're still not going to have that great of an experience with it. But the battery life is another horrible aspect of it, especially now in 2021. It had a 2600 mAh battery, which actually isn't that bad of a size battery. But I don't know, I'm not a huge fan of smaller size batteries, especially them being enclosed. Apple does it every year. They decrease the size battery, then they decrease it. I want consistent growth, and then at this time, they decreased it from the predecessor, but then they increased it again, and it's just kind of a weird process. But for sure, I think the software and the battery is probably one of the worst aspects of this phone, but it doesn't mean it's all bad. I hyped up the build quality, I hyped up the camera. Sometimes, the software, the battery, it's just part of the process. So in terms of that pretty much covers up the worst aspect of the Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge. Now let's move on to kind of I guess the most average part of this phone, which was the performance. Now I want to say this, when this phone probably came out first time, it was probably a really good performing phone. I just did not pick this thing up day one. I picked up the Galaxy S7, I think day one or week one. This phone, it's still actually pretty decent in performance. The Exynos 7420 octa chipset, an octa-core CPU with 3 gigs of RAM, and I think the performance is pretty average as well. I don't think it's something that people would go and, purposely pick up because of the performance, but at this time, I think from my experience, because performance just, maybe it dropped super low in terms of performance, but it kind of averaged out. So nowadays when I mess with it, it doesn't really feel like a super outdated phone in terms of performance. It definitely doesn't feel like a super smooth phone by any means, but because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking that it is a 6-year-old phone, I think I'm kind of giving it the benefit of the doubt, and all I can remember now is that when I messed with my Galaxy S6 Edge, when I messed with my Galaxy S6 and I custom ROM'd it, I had a really good experience with it. It was overheating like crazy, but I was surprised by what I was able to do with it. And I can only imagine if this phone has the capability, then it kind of fixes a lot of problems that this phone has. But I think if you're trying to do basic things like call people, text people, whatever, you're probably going to be okay. But if you're trying to do anything more than that, and I mean anything like intensive gaming or anything like that, this phone really doesn't hold up too well. And you're probably better off picking up something like a Galaxy S8 or something rather than picking up this specific device. So in terms of that, the performance aspect, that really pretty much covers it up for the most part. And to kind of sum up this video, is the Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge so worth it in 2021? Well, this is what I can tell you. This phone completely is not worth it in 2021 anymore. This phone wasn't worth it last year. I don't even think this phone was worth it in 2018. This phone stands as a relic in some ways because of the evolution from the Galaxy S5 to the Galaxy S6 Edge. I think it was a pretty impressive thing that Samsung did at the time. I think it was pretty important, but I don't think this phone is, something that people should continuously use right now, or something that people should go out of their way to buy. Unless you're trying to buy it as some sort of collector's item, I would kind of stay away from this specific device, even if you want to custom ROM it. The build quality and all of the screen can be a little misleading because it's such a good looking display and it's such a good feeling phone in the hand. So some people may think to themselves like, oh, it's a 2015 phone, but it still kind of feels like a 2021 phone, so I might as well go ahead and pick it up and use it. But the worst things about this phone are like the software. It's severely outdated. I don't know if you're able to download a bunch of apps still on Android 7.0, considering we're on Android 11 right now, but you're going to be better off if you pick up something like a Galaxy S8. That thing is already outdated as well, but it's still getting software support. It's still kind of supported as well at the end of the day. So I think if you're, not in a rush, I would recommend saving your money and picking up a Galaxy S8, probably a Galaxy S9. That's like the lowest I would go, to be honest, but an S8 is also kind of good. I would probably recommend not picking up a Galaxy S6 Edge anymore. It's your best bet if you just kind of stay away from that and kind of move towards something like a Galaxy S8 or a Galaxy S10 if you can, a OnePlus 6T if you can as well. Those phones are really good. I probably would not recommend picking up a Galaxy S6 Edge anymore in 2021. So I'll go ahead and leave the other phones that I mentioned, that I would probably recommend this year in the description below. You can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys can hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.